And you also, did you pass any conversation with Mr. McDivitt on the Ultimate Warrior episode? Because that's going to be a fun one, I'm sure. That has to be an episode of Perry Mason and Matlock rolled into one. The majority of Warrior's dealings with Vince were through lawyers.
Yeah. I did ask Jerry a bit about it, when we were corresponding over the phone, but he for him, it was kind of like, yeah, there were some issues here and there. And, for him, it wasn't of a primary concern like the steroid trials were. But yeah, the Ultimate Warrior episode, I mean, it's definitely, we're just finishing up actually today. It's very interesting.
Well, Warriors legal claims were never based in very much evidence or reality, but God, there was a ton of them. He made up for it in quantity, what he lacked in quality. They've done the hit pieces in the past when the office was on the outs with the Warrior. Mm-hmm. And then they did a nicer one when he was back on. This is, I would assume, going to be a fair, even-handed assessment of Ultimate Warrior, which means that everybody's going to bury him because nobody liked him. Would that be correct, or am I too far afield?
Well, Jason, I've been yammering. You want to?
Yeah, like there's been, there's a couple people who tended to bury him, but we were. I was a fan of Ultimate Warrior growing up. I was born in 1982, and so I was a prime audience for the Ultimate Warrior, and I had his action figures. And it's kind of like how you say in the episode, it's like as you grow up older as a fan of that character, and then when they tried to bring him back later on in the 90s, wrestling had changed at that point, so he didn't really quite fit into it. And then as he kind of faded off from wrestling and started doing more public speaking engagements, and he would speak very controversially, and so that made me as a fan really grapple with my fandom for him. But to get to interview his very first wife, Sherry Tyree, who was with him through the first 10 years of his career, and to hear her perspective of watching his very fast rise, and what made Jim Hellwig the person that he is, and what were some of the things that he dealt with in his childhood that have made him who he is, and why he may have went through the business and handled certain relationships in certain ways. Her interview really gave us, I think, a bit more perspective on who he was as a person and why he kind of lived his life so fast.
Yeah, and I think it's we didn't really ever intend. A lot of these episodes that are in season 3, we've kind of thought about years ago about eventually getting around to. Ultimate Warrior really wasn't one that I think we ever thought of or considered until recently, and it was mostly due to the fact that our viewers just were insistent and demanded that we do a story about Ultimate Warrior, and I tried to kind of wrap my head around what would the story kind of be, because obviously his passing is just wild. The circumstances around reconciling with Vince after that just tumultuous relationship, and then dying less than or whatever 24 hours later is just insane, and that's compelling. But obviously there is these two extremes of the self-destruction of Ultimate Warrior documentary, and then of course the one they did when they brought him back, and it was just kind of what's left there. And then when we did reach out and meet and talk to Sherry, his first wife, they were married for 10 years, I think 9 or 10 years. And for her, it's her perspective. This episode almost is kind of her story, because it's about she meets Jim when he's a bouncer, and he's on a path to being a chiropractor. He's just a normal, semi-normal guy, and they're going to have a semi-normal life. And then all of a sudden his need to be in the spotlight just kind of changes everything. And they, he becomes a bodybuilder, and now he's going to meet Sting and becomes a wrestler. And then he meteorically rises to, stardom very quickly. And it's just kind of this wild roller coaster ride. But I think one of the things about this episode that's very compelling is that I think Sherry does a good job of like we're saying with the Pillman and everything else, is just kind of bringing more of a human side to a complicated human portrait of who this guy is. And yeah, you're right. Like, it was really hard to find people who wanted to speak positively about him. But I think the episode does push beyond just like, oh my gosh, this guy was really difficult. What a nightmare, into like, let's try to understand at least where he's coming from. And I do think that one thing that was eye-opening to me, and it's not an excuse obviously for some of his behavior, but like, the idea that from a very young age, he was absolutely aware of, his heart disease running in his family, and his father and his grandfather died very young from that. And I think that was always in the back of his mind, is that he knew his time was going to be very short. And then it leads you to believe, like, how much was he really aware of that, in the last year of his life, So I don't know.
I'm not sure that I would have gone so heavy on the monkey hormones if heart disease was running that rampantly in my family, but
right.
Which it has, and which is I'm not a big guy for monkey hormones, but here's the thing with some of the guys you profile,
mm-hmm.
and Pillman ticks both these boxes, but invariably it's either a big star that wasn't a likable person, or a likable person that never got to be a big star. But boy, it's a sad story, like a Chris Canyon. I don't know which one Johnny Canine falls in. The likable guy that blew up the police station. He was the friendliest police station bomber ever.